Tony Bobulinsky getting a chance to testify before Congress in public today. There was an empty seat next to him, though, and that was for Hunter Biden, who did not appear today. For more on this, I want to bring in James Lynch now. He's a news reporter for the National Review, and he joins us now. James, good to talk to you, sir.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
All right, so Hunter Biden just not appearing today, although he previously said he was eager to testify publicly. What happened?
Look, Hunter Biden, a couple months ago, he stood outside the Capitol and said to the House Oversight Committee, I'm here, I'm ready, I want to testify publicly, let's do it. And then when the time actually came for a public hearing today, he didn't show up. And we know why he didn't show up. It's because he gave a private deposition last month. And during that deposition, he confirmed that his father met foreign business partners and spoke to them on speakerphone.
Yeah, the business partners confirmed a lot of the details today. I kept hearing Democrats say that there's still no evidence of Joe Biden's involvement. What's your finding on that question?
Yeah, I did notice throughout the hearing they kept saying that there was no evidence, even though Tony Bobulinsky was sitting right in front of them, and they were talking about how Bobulinsky met with Joe Biden when they were negotiating a joint venture with a Chinese company called CEFC. Joe Biden, we now know from the impeachment inquiry and the investigative efforts in the House that Joe Biden met his son's business partners. Joe Biden was well aware of what his son was doing. His son even flew to China to meet one of his business partners on Air Force Two. So the idea that there's no evidence is simply untrue. And I think the testimony from Bobulinsky, from Jason Galanis today, and from others has shown that Joe Biden knew about what his son was doing with his foreign business partners and was definitely involved in some capacity.
Yeah, Tony Bobulinsky, as you point out, not the only witness today to testify to how Joe Biden and company were making money. Jason Galanis also there, a former business associate of Hunter Biden. What can you tell us about Jason?
Yeah, so Jason Galanis is saying that Joe Biden helped his son close deals with Chinese and Russian business partners. He specifically mentions a massive company that they tried to create called Burnham that was supposed to get a huge investment from a Chinese fund called Harvest that had a $300 billion valuation. Galanis eventually was prosecuted for an unrelated bond issuance scheme, and he believes that the Department of Justice, in its prosecution of him, protected Hunter Biden from facing any consequences, even though Hunter Biden was involved in the entity called Burnham, and Hunter Biden and Devin Archer, too, knew about the bond issuance scheme.
So in other words, Jason Galanis was working with Hunter on the very same thing that got Galanis put behind bars, but Hunter got off scot-free?
It doesn't appear that Hunter was directly involved with the bond issuance scheme, but Galanis does believe that the Justice Department looked the other way when he went up to them and said, look, I have evidence that could potentially implicate Hunter Biden here.
Gotcha.
And he also said that he's been subject to retaliation ever since.
Galanis did testify today. He testified from prison today alongside his attorney, our friend Mark Paoletta. They're sitting there next to him. And in his testimony today, he talked about one of the times that Hunter took a call from his father, and here's what that sounded like.
Further to that, I recall being with Hunter Biden and Devin Archer at the Peninsula Bar in New York, where Hunter took a call from his father and told him things were going well with Henry's Allen Harvest, and that he might need a little help getting across the finish line.
Democrats made a lot of hay out of the fact that that testimony came from a convicted felon who was serving time in federal prison. But the reality is that that guy was Hunter Biden's business partner at one point.
Yeah, Galanis was one of Hunter Biden's business partners. And look, Hunter Biden himself is facing 12 criminal counts, so he's not necessarily a saint here at all. And it says more about Hunter Biden than I think anybody else that he was, while his father was vice president, doing business with people who have clearly shown themselves to be crooks. And so I don't think that's the talking point that Democrats believe it is. And Galanis, as you were saying, was talking about this Chinese deal, and he says that Hunter Biden put his father on a phone call during negotiations with Russian oligarch Elena Baturina.
Yes.
As bank records have shown, wired $3.5 million to a company associated with Hunter Biden and Devin Archer.
Yes, and Elena Baturina, I didn't realize until I was listening to the congressional testimony today. Somehow I had missed this detail. She is the single richest woman in Russia. I didn't realize that. So she's the woman who's people keep describing as an oligarch in Russia, the wife to the former mayor of Moscow, the woman who, when the Biden administration imposed sanctions on, it seems like every Russian oligarch on the planet, she did not get a sanction. And to top it all off, she is the richest woman in Russia. How did she evade getting a sanction, being such a powerful Russian oligarch?
Yeah, she's a billionaire. I think her estimated net worth is $1.3 billion as of 2024. And I don't really have an explanation for how she avoided sanctions. I mean, almost every other Russian oligarch, even if they were tangentially connected to the Putin regime, got sanctioned after Russia invaded Ukraine. In the latest round of sanctions, even Baturina's name was not included. And those sanctions were imposed after Alexei Navalny died in Russian prison. But I guess she's just been able to get off scot-free time and time again. But I can't really tell you why.
That's deeply suggestive, isn't it? That's deeply suggestive. By the way, there's a chance for some reporting there. I mean, how many people does the United States government consider a Russian oligarch? What's the total number of people that you would say they're an oligarch? And then what percentage of those had sanctions imposed upon them? And if the answer is that Elena Baturina is basically the only person who hasn't had a sanction imposed upon her, doesn't that tell you everything? I mean, it is kind of fascinating that she somehow has evaded it. And it leads one to start to speculate, James Lynch, as I'm doing now, that maybe they realize, that Biden realizes if he imposes sanctions on her, well, she's got the goods on the Biden family. The last thing he wants to do is impose a sanction on a woman who could take him down.
Yeah, I think most Russian billionaires are considered to be oligarchs, rightfully so, and a lot of them have been subject to sanctions, even those who are living in other countries and have tens of millions worth of assets in other countries. And I believe that Coglianese was also involved in the efforts to help Baturina open a bank account in the United States, because he says that she invested in Rosemont Realty, which was a real estate wing of the broader Biden enterprise overseen by Devin Archer. And so Coglianese knows more than most about Baturina's finances, her portfolio, and her efforts to basically start doing business in the United States.
Yet today, Tony Bobulinsky, in his testimony, which, by the way, is, again, long overdue in public before Congress, Bobulinsky talked about how Hunter and Jim Biden both lied in their sworn congressional testimony. I want people to hear this.
Biden gave his transcribed interview on February 28th and lied throughout his testimony. Here's just one egregious example of Hunter's perjury. He lied to the committee on important details concerning his money demands and threats to CFC in text messages on July 30th and 31st, 2017. He leveraged his father's presence next to him in that infamous text to strong-arm CFC to paying Hunter immediately. Jim Biden also lied extensively throughout his transcribed interview on February 21st and perjured himself. An example of that, on page 100 of his transcript, Jim is asked specifically, do you recall having a meeting with Hunter Biden, Tony Bobulinsky, and Joe Biden? Jim's response, absolutely not. The committee was so shocked by his perjury that they asked him the same question multiple times. Each time he denied meeting with me and Joe Biden. After the committee showed him text messages confirming that I met with Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Jim Biden at the Beverly Hilton in May 2017, Jim Biden, with a former U.S. attorney lawyer sitting next to him, still denied that meeting took place. Hunter Biden, in his own transcribed interview, confirmed that that meeting took place. Hunter confirmed his uncle perjured himself in front of this committee.
I mean, Tony Bobulinsky makes a good point here that the stories that are being told are clearly conflicting. In other words, somebody's lying here. And the reality is Hunter and Jim have all the incentives in the world to mislead Congress about this.
Yeah, Bobulinsky accused Hunter and Jim both of lying. And those stories, as you were saying, Vince, that was some of the reason why the House Republicans wanted Hunter Biden to testify publicly, because Hunter, during his testimony, confirmed what Tony Bobulinsky's been saying, that Bobulinsky shook hands with Joe Biden. They met at a hotel in California in May 2017 during the CEFC negotiations. And Jim Biden basically said, look, I have no recollection that this happened. And Jim Biden also denied ever being in business with Bobulinsky, despite the fact that during his testimony, Jim Biden was shown a piece of paper that he signed related to the negotiations with his signature on it, and he still despite the fact that this was something that he was part of, denied ever having any relationship with Bobulinski. So it is strange that Jim Biden and Hunter Biden had conflicting accounts of Bobulinski's involvement. Neither of them wanted to testify publicly, and Jim Biden appears to have denied being involved in something that he put his signature on. So those were important questions that would have been addressed if either of the Bidens had decided to show up.
I know recently that Republicans have sent a subpoena for Hunter Biden's phone records. That would be, I think, revelatory if they actually got detailed records, because it would show the times in which Hunter actually made calls to his father and who he was speaking with over an extended period of time. Any sense that that's going to happen soon, that they would get access to those phone records soon?
Yeah, we'll see what happens with the subpoena. The phone calls are definitely important because of the known instances where Joe Biden spoke to his son's business partners on speakerphone. And look, Hunter and Joe Biden were on a family plan with AT&T. So AT&T, because of the subpoena, should be able to produce those records of the phone calls and of the bills that Hunter Biden helped pay for his father.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there, because there's still unanswered questions about, as Devin Archer explained, Hunter Biden called D.C. under pressure from Burisma, and it's not fully confirmed whether Joe Biden was on the receiving end of that phone call. So that subpoena from AT&T will definitely be able to confirm the discussions on speakerphone and potentially address who Hunter Biden's calling when Burisma was pressuring him to get something done in Washington.
And then finally, on holding Hunter Biden accountable, I don't expect the Justice Department to prosecute him for contempt of Congress, regardless of the circumstances. But what's the status today? Was Hunter under subpoena to appear publicly? Did he satisfy the original subpoena just by testifying privately? And to what extent do you anticipate Republicans playing hardball here, issuing any kind of subpoena and then making a referral to the Justice Department, regardless of its chance of success?
So Hunter was subpoenaed to testify privately, and he did comply with that subpoena last month after stall tactics and back and forth with the GOP. I don't believe he was subpoenaed for the hearing today, but I would not rule out the GOP potentially issuing another subpoena to have him testify publicly, explain some of these discrepancies, and talk to the American people about what the Biden business enterprise was.
All right. James Lynch at National Review, who follows this ever so closely. Sir, thank you very much for your time today.